Hello, everyone, and welcome to yet another Coaching Minds Live. I'm so excited to be here and to be discussing a topic that is so dear and near to my heart, and a topic that I think, involves each and every one of us. We all want to live a healthier lifestyle. We all want to either maintain our current weight or lose weight. So I'm really excited to dive into this, and I'm hoping that you all are having an amazing weekend wherever you may be. And yeah, let's dive into it. So today I'm going to be discussing three things. The first is I'm going to be discussing the binge cycle. Secondly, I'm going to be discussing the plate module. And thirdly, I'm going to be giving you some tips and tricks as you go into either losing weight, maintaining your weight, or just moving towards a healthier lifestyle. So the first question that I get asked often as a nutritionalist is why nutrition is important. So nutrition is important for many reasons. It's part of a sufficient and an appropriate intake of the right amount of each food group, both your macro and your micronutrients. So your macronutrients are made up of your big food groups, which are your carbohydrates, your fats, your fruits and vegetables, so on and so forth. Your micronutrients are made up of vitamins and minerals, and it's very important that we take in both macro and micronutrients. The other reason why nutrition is important is it allows you to live your best life. It can influence a mediocre diet. So like yesterday in our webinar where Paul was mentioning how, we can become obsessed with a certain food because we really, really enjoy it. Nutrition can really help you to go out of your comfort zone with food and try new things. And when we stick to certain foods or when we avoid certain food groups, hello Vijaya, when we avoid certain food groups, we actually cause harm. So Vijaya, just to catch you up, today I'm going to be discussing why nutrition is important, the binge cycle, and the plate module. So I was just backtracking and saying how important it is for us to eat all food groups, and that when we eat, we need to focus on both macro and micronutrients. Macronutrients being our carbohydrates, our fruits and vegetables, our fats, our grains, and protein, and micronutrients being our vitamins and minerals. So in many cases, these diets that we may go on to maintain or to lose weight may seem really, really helpful, but in some cases they can cause harm. Now, the reason why they can cause harm is because they can cause what's known as a binge cycle. So to explain what the binge cycle is, it usually happens when we make that decision that we are going to go into a healthier lifestyle, that we are going to lose weight, or in some cases gain weight. And what can happen is that we start off with a tension or a craving. So we go onto a diet and it tells us to maybe get rid of a certain food group. So let's say, for example, a low carb diet, which tells you to remove certain carbohydrates. Naturally, because your body thrives on all of the food groups, it starts to crave those carbohydrates because you're not eating them. That can lead to binge eating. So eventually you just can't take it anymore. You give into that craving and you binge eat. When we binge eat and we give into those cravings, we start to feel either guilt or shame, and we go through what's known as a purging. So to avoid weight gain, we can either starve ourselves, or we can immediately decide that we are going to try a different diet, go into another strict diet, and that's what causes what's known as yo-yo dieting or distorted hunger. When we have distorted hunger, or we go through yo-yo dieting, we never ever maintain our weight. So it's very important that when we decide to make a change towards going to a healthier lifestyle, that we pick a diet that is realistic. So I want to ask all of you if there is anything in particular. Hi, Paula. If there's anything in particular that you currently are cutting out of your diet, no matter how small or big it is there anything that you are currently cutting out of your diet, and why are you cutting it out of your diet? Right, so as discussed in the title, today the main topic is the plate module. So if you haven't heard of the plate module before, the plate module allows us to create balanced meals that include every single food group. So like I said earlier, it's very important that we eat every single food group, because every single food group provides us with different nutrients that are needed in order for us to maintain our current weight and live a healthier lifestyle. So what's interesting about this is in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, diets were very, very popular for cutting certain things out. So low sugar, no carb, low fat diets were very, very popular. And although they helped people lose a massive amount of weight, they couldn't be maintained and they weren't realistic. You think about all of these diets that come out, or all of these meal plans. They're either 7-day, 28-day, or a 30-day meal plan that is going to help you lose 10 kilograms and so on and so forth. And when you finish that diet, it is more than likely, and 90% of people regain that weight within the first year. Because these diets are a quick fix. They're not there to help you maintain a healthy lifestyle. So again, it's very important that we learn how to eat all of these food groups in moderation, and that we understand the serving sizes that we should be eating and how much of them we should be eating. So this is what the plate module is. The plate module is about creating a balanced plate, or a balanced meal that focuses on all food groups in a healthy way, while focusing also on the portion and the serving size. So in your head, I want you to picture a plate, an empty plate. Okay, and we are going to add these elements and these food groups to this plate. So please stop me if you have any questions or any thoughts that you'd like to share, or if you have tried any diets that have worked for you, or any tips and tricks that you would like to share with everyone here, please feel more than welcome to. So again, we have this plate in our head, and we are going to split it into the food groups. So the first thing that we need to add to our plate are grains. Okay, these grains can be anything from quinoa to barley to oats, even, couscous is a good example of grain. So we need to eat 1/4 of grains on our plate. So 1/4 of our plate needs to be grains. It's very important that when we eat grains, we focus on whole grains. Now, the reason why I want us to focus on whole grains is because the endosperm hasn't been removed from them. So for those of you who don't know what the endosperm is, that's the part of the grain that has the most fiber and the most nutrients. So for example, brown rice against white rice. White rice is a refined grain. So it's gone through a system and has had its endosperm removed from it, while brown rice is a whole grain and still has all of its nutrients, all of its fiber, and it hasn't been touched. So 1/4 of our plate should be whole grains as opposed to refined grains, and you can have 1 to 3 servings of whole grains per meal. So if you have 3 meals a day, you should be having 1 to 3 servings of whole grains every time you have a meal. To find out what that serving is, you can look on the packaging of anything. You can look on the back of a box of oats or a bag of rice, and you'll be able to see what that serving size is. Right, so we've covered grains. The next food group that we should be adding to our daily meals is protein. And just like grains, we should be having 1/4 of our plate filled with proteins. Now, a lot of people think that protein just consists of meat, and this is so far from the truth. Protein can consist of anything from eggs to beans to even dairy like cheese and yogurt. So we need to be having 1/4 of protein. Now, when you add protein to your plate, I'd like you, especially if you're adding meat as your main protein, to try and remove the fat from it. The reason why is because we want to focus more on unsaturated fat than fat. So to make your protein far more healthier, you can remove the fat. So for example, chicken. Okay, a healthy way to make chicken even healthier and cut back on those calories and just make it overall healthier is to remove the skin from it, because that would be the saturated fat on the chicken. Right. A serving size of protein is typically 30 grams. So to put this into perspective for you, if you can picture the size of a matchbox, okay, a serving of protein would typically be 3 matchboxes. Now, I know that seems like nothing, and I know a lot of us will eat far more than just 3 little matchboxes of protein at a time, but that's perfectly fine because you are allowed to have 3 to 4 servings of that protein for every meal. Okay, so we've covered grains, which is 1/4 of our plate, and we've covered protein, which is another 1/4 of our plate. So I have an interesting question for you. What do you think should take over the majority of our plate? What is the next thing that we are going to add to this plate? So we've covered grains, we've covered protein. What is the next thing that we have to add to our plate in order for it to be balanced and healthy? What is the next food group that we're going to touch on? Can anyone take a guess? I'll give a few moments to guess what the next food group is. So we've covered proteins. So picture maybe a dinner meal. Maybe you're having chicken and you're having brown rice along with it. What would be the next thing that you would add to that meal to make it balanced and healthy? Right, so since it's so quiet, I'll give you the answer. The answer is fruits and vegetables. So an easy guess there. So half of our plate should consist of fruits and vegetables. Vegetables. That's it, Vijaya, you got it. That's the one. So vegetables or even fruit. Let's not forget fruit. I know a lot of us like having fruit at breakfast time. So fruit and vegetables. So half of our plate should be fruits and vegetables. And the interesting thing here is that we are allowed to have 1 to 3 servings of fruits or vegetables per meal. Okay, or we can have 3 to 5 different kinds of fruits or vegetables a day. Now, a single serving of fruit or vegetables would be 1 cup of raw fruit or vegetables is considered a serving. Or what I like to say is just a handful. So you can measure with your hands, because typically we don't walk around with a cup in our handbags, but a handful of fruit or vegetables would be 1 serving. So you can have 1 to 3 servings of that. I also always say to people that it really, really helps to have more cruciferous vegetables than any other veg. So a cruciferous vegetable is typically your green vegetables like broccoli or cucumber. And the reason why is because these have incredible anti-inflammatory additions to them. They really, really help. They also lower your risks of getting cancer, and they really, really assist the liver. Now, I always say that the liver is, besides our heart and our brain, is definitely one of the most important organs that we have. Why? Because it's that detoxing organ. It's that organ that is going to remove all of those toxins and gunk and everything that your body is not using. So if you want to maintain that liver health and make sure that your body is continuously cleansing itself, you can eat more green vegetables. Okay, just really, really helps. Your liver absolutely loves them. Okay, they also contain what's known as goitrodreins, and goitrodreins are what's known as a thyroid additive, which means that green vegetables also help us with our hormone balance, which is absolutely fantastic, especially for youngsters that are going into puberty or women that are going into menopause, and we just need that bit of help. We just need to maintain that thyroid health. We need to add more green vegetables to our diet. Okay, I'm going to give you some fantastic examples a bit later on what healthy whole grains are, healthy proteins, and healthy fruits and vegetables. Hello, Paul. Yay, it's not just the girls. Yeah, so I'm going to be giving you guys some examples of healthy grains, healthy proteins, and healthy fruits and vegetables later on. Okay, so when we add certain things to our diet, or when we take certain things away, it's very important that we do it in small increments. If you do it very, very steadfast and at a speedily pace, it can cause certain problems in your metabolism. So for example, the green vegetables that I was talking about, they are known to be very, very high in gas. So they can cause us to feel very, very bloated and very, very sluggish. So the best thing that we can do is just add it in small parts to our diet. So instead of eating green vegetables every day, maybe just try eating them once or twice a week, and then slowly increase that so that your body can get used to digesting it. Okay, so covered all the bases. So 1/4 of grains, making sure that they are whole grains instead of refined. 1/4 of proteins, okay, which is not just meat, okay. And then the most important, half of your plate should be fruits and vegetables. Okay, so Paul, like you were saying yesterday, in the webinar, that you get a little bit obsessed with a certain food and then you start to eat a lot of it. Okay, it's very important that when we eat a certain food group, that we eat different parts of that food group. So instead of just focusing on one fruit or vegetable, try and eat the rainbow. I always say eat the rainbow. Try and, include different parts of that food group so that you don't get bored, because that can happen. I always say that if you start to eat the same thing over and over and over again, it can start to feel like you're eating oatmeal all the time. So try and eat more of one type of food group. Okay. Hi, Shannon. Thank you so much for joining us today. If you have any questions about nutrition or the plate module, or how you can eat more healthily or a more balanced diet, then please leave them in the comment section below and I'll answer them for you. That includes everyone. Okay, so I want to ask you guys an interesting question. Okay, what do you think is more filling or keeps us fuller for longer? Is it fruits and vegetables, grains, proteins, or fats? I'm even going to include fiber there. So which food group or which nutrient do you think keeps us fuller for longer? Let's see what you guys come up with. So while you guys are answering that question, I want to let you guys know that I know that a lot of us feel that eating healthier can be quite expensive. So some of us may turn to canned or frozen goods. And I just want to break a myth right now and tell you guys that frozen food or canned food is just as nutritionally dense as fresh food is. So if you can't afford to buy fresh vegetables, that's perfectly fine. Frozen vegetables are just as good for you as fresh vegetables are. Okay, so Paul's said here that he thinks it's carbohydrates. Okay, Shannon says that it's grains. Okay, and Vijay says it's protein. So what's interesting about Vijaya's answer here is that's usually veggies. Okay. Right. So what's interesting about Vijaya's answer is that a lot of people usually think that protein keeps us fuller for longer because a lot of diets are higher in protein than anything else. But sorry to burst your bubble, but you are all incorrect. The thing that keeps us fuller for longer are fats. Believe it or not, fats keep us fuller for longer. And what's so insane is so earlier, how I was saying that a lot of these diets that were created in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, how a lot of them cut things away. All of those diets cut fat out. And that's why some people would eventually, eat a meal, half an hour, they're starving, and they get into that binge cycle and they start to yo-yo diet. So fats are just as important as everything else. So I know that in the plate module that I just described, so if you just joined, then go back in this live and see how I've broken it down. But I know that fats aren't added to the plate module, but they are very, very, very important. They keep us fuller for longer. I know a lot of us stay away from it because we think it's gonna, we're gonna gain weight and we're not gonna fit into those pair of jeans anymore, but that is simply not the case. Very true, Shannon. You are on the ball. Avocado is a fantastic example of a fat. In fact, it's one of the healthier fats, and it's one of the examples that I'm going to give later. So, fantastic example. Okay. So, another thing that I want to go on to is a lot of people think that, so I'm just going to get rid of a few myths here. So, like I said, canned and frozen fruits and vegetables are just as healthy as fresh. Okay, the other thing is that a lot of people think that fruit juice is very, very healthy. So the problem with fruit juice is that it can contain more than one serving of fruit. Your average glass of orange juice can contain up between 5 to 8 oranges. Now, remember earlier how I said that in our serving size of fruits or vegetables are usually 3 to 5 a day. So if you have 1 glass of orange juice, you shouldn't be eating fruits or vegetables for the rest of the day. So if you do want to have a type of juice, I would recommend, instead of having a full glass, maybe just having half a glass, or switch to vegetable juice instead. It's far more healthier, it's higher in fiber, and it's just better for you. It doesn't contain as much sugar as well, which for many of us can be a problem. I know myself, I have those sugar cravings, and I usually feel like, okay, I'll just have a glass of fruit juice. It'll be healthier, but it's just not the case. Okay, the next thing when we're creating this balanced plate is that, and yes, typically I'm Samantha, so I wouldn't be Samantha if I didn't say this, is that we need to eat sustainably. Okay, Dr. Stephen Peters, which is one of my favorites when it comes to nutrition, did a study on how more expensive certain foods are because they are imported or exported. So whatever country you're living in, focus on what's in season at that time or what is grown locally in your country. It'll just be better in your pocket. It won't be as expensive. And, you know, for example, like here in South Africa, you know, Shannon, you were mentioning avocados. Here in South Africa, they are very, very expensive. So as much as I love them, I don't purchase them. But that doesn't mean that there isn't something else that I can eat that's just as healthy. You know, there are those alternatives out there. So an alternative for me for avocados would be olives, for example, because they're also a healthy fat. Okay, so eat sustainably, focus on what's in season. You know, if it's winter in your country and certain fruits aren't being grown, then just stay away from them because they're just so much expensive. So many people say that eating healthier is more expensive than anything else, and that's simply not the truth. It's just because, you know, we see a diet, we look at it and we think that we have to follow it to the T, but you can find alternatives that aren't that expensive. And, you know, you can, people always stay away from, like I said earlier, frozen goods or canned goods because they think that they're unhealthy, and they just aren't. And they are a cheaper option for you. So if that's what you need to do, then go for it. So Paul says here, one of the best things about Colombia, they have huge avocados for like 20 minutes. That is so unfair. I wish that avocados were cheap here. It's probably a luxury item for mine. I say that I don't buy them, but I probably do. I'm very, very naughty, but they're very yummy. They make a fantastic addition to any meal. Okay, so another thing that I want to say is that we need to we don't want our food to be boring. So whatever meal you make, don't stay away from herbs and spices. Okay, they not only add flavor to your meals, but they also contain those micronutrients that we need. So micronutrients, again, being those vitamins and minerals. Okay, they're just so important. So don't just add salt and pepper to your meal. Go crazy. One of my favorite spices that I love using and that I used a lot when I was a vegan was cumin. I absolutely love it. And so yeah, add some flavor to those meals. Some people think that, okay, I'm just going to have chicken, rice, and veg, and it's just going to be absolutely boring and there's nothing that I can do to it. But there's so much that you can add to it. Have fun with it, have a blast with it, and as always, get creative. Okay, so coming back to the question that I asked you guys about fats, okay, when we're eating foods, we need to focus on eating stuff that is far more nutrient dense than energy dense. Okay, what I mean by that is that instead of focusing on stuff that like carbohydrates, so bread, I know that it fills you up, but it doesn't have as much nutrients as fruits and vegetables are. And when we eat more nutrients-dense foods as opposed to energy-dense foods, we can eat more of it. An insane example of this is protein. So one serving of protein is equivalent to 3 cups of raw fruit or vegetables. Okay, so focus more on, and I know we don't want to be rabbits. I know we don't just want to eat fruits and vegetables, but the more nutrient-dense foods that you eat, the far more of it you can eat. Okay, that's why with the plate module, you can have half of your plate filled with fruits and vegetables because they're nutrient dense and you can just eat the hell out of them. The Shannon says here, yes, Paul, many of the avocados here in the US come from Mexico. Likewise here, we import a lot of our stuff. So for example, here in wintertime, berries like strawberries and berries and stuff like that don't grow locally, so we import them and then they hike the price on it. So in wintertime, as much as I love eating those things, I try to avoid them just so I can save money. And it's not like strawberries and berries are the only fruits out there. There's so much more choices out there. And what's fantastic here in South Africa, I don't know about other countries, but here in South Africa in wintertime, we lose berries, but we gain oranges and grapefruit. And I absolutely love grapefruit. So in every season, you can find something that you like. Vijaya says, spices are the heart of our food here. Coriander seeds, cumin, pepper, turmeric, cloves, carom seeds, and a lot more. Yeah. Vijaya, maybe you should have a skill studio and how to teach us how to use spices to spice up our life. It's such an amazing additive to food. They really are. I don't think spices get as much credit as they are due. So Paul says, are there better sources of protein than others, and what would you recommend? Okay, so I'm going to go into recommendations now. Okay, to answer your question. Okay, so let's start with grains. So like I said earlier, it's very important that we focus on whole grains. So for those of you who have just joined, whole grains, right, have not gone through a process where the endosperm has been removed. Now, the endosperm of grain, right, is where the majority of the nutrients are, where the majority of the fiber is. So earlier I was using the example of white and brown rice. So white rice has been refined and it's gone through a system and its endosperm has been removed, whereas in brown rice hasn't gone through a system and it's a whole grain. Okay, so good examples of whole grains would be your barley, your brown rice, like I mentioned, bulgur wheat, quinoa is a massive example, and then one of my favorites, which is oatmeal. And a lot of people think that oats can only be used for breakfast. That is not that's not the truth. If you guys like, I can share an amazing recipe with you guys on how you can make savory oatmeal. It's so yummy. But yeah, so those would be examples of grains. Then to move on to Paul's question here about healthy proteins. Proteins are not limited to meats, okay, to animal products, okay? So good examples of proteins that you can add to your diet are things like fish. When you pick your fish, I would suggest that you go more for white fish as opposed to other fish like salmon. The reason being that other fish tends to be fairly high in mercury, which can be kind of harmful. So when picking fish, focus more on stuff like haddock, focus more on hake or solefish, kingklip. Cod is an amazing example of this. It all depends on where you are and what country you live in. But yeah, so fish is an example of that. Then lean beef, and the reason why I say lean is because, like I said earlier, whatever protein we are eating, especially when it comes to meat, it's very important that we cut away as much of the fat as we can. Now, yes, I did say earlier that fat is very healthy and that it keeps us fuller for longer, but there is a massive difference between saturated and unsaturated fat. Avocados are unsaturated fats, whereas in the fat that you would find on your meat is saturated. So it's far more unhealthier than, it would be far better for you to take a piece of steak and slap avocado on it than eat the piece of steak with the fat attached to it. Okay, which leads me on to the next example, which would be chicken. Removing the skin away from it, of course. And then let's go into examples of protein that people don't even think about. So dairy. Okay, dairy is a fantastic source of protein. Things like plain yogurt, cheese, cottage cheese, anything like that. That's a great example of a healthy protein. The other thing is nuts. So stuff like cashews, almonds, macadamia nuts. They're very, very high in protein, and they're also a source of those healthy fats that I was talking about. So that's also a nice example. So if you're having like a green salad and you add almonds or cashews to it, then it already increases the protein value of the meal and it adds those fats to it. So it will keep you fuller for longer. Then the last example of good proteins would be lentils, peas, and beans. Now, as a vegan, and this is probably one of the reasons why I gave up that notion, because there aren't a lot of options for protein in a vegan diet, you eat a lot of like lentils and beans and peas, and you just get completely and utterly sick of them. Because in order for you to, maintain your protein, you have to eat like 3 cups of chickpeas as opposed to just having a chicken breast. So I eventually got so sick of it, and that's why I say variety is so important. But if veganism works for you, then go for it. Personally, it didn't work for me. Okay, so before I move on, Vijay is asking something. Is it okay to drink water while eating meals? Also, some say to drink 1 glass of water 30 minutes before eating. Is that fine? This is an amazing question, Vijay. So you're correct. It's very important that whatever we drink it 15 to 30 minutes before we have our meal. Now, the reason why we should do that is because if you are drinking while you are eating, you can slightly confuse your body. So your body thinks that it's full, and then half an hour later, you will feel hungry again because you've had more liquid than actual substance, because water just runs through the body. It's there to detoxify it. And the other reason why you should avoid drinking while you are eating is because it can cause you bloating. It can cause you to feel really, really sluggish. Okay, so yes, the healthier option here would be to drink a glass of water 15 to 30 minutes before having your meal. Okay, and this brings me on to why should we drink before we eat? Okay, so the reason why we should drink 15 to 30 minutes before we eat is not only to just avoid feeling sluggish or anything, but our body has a terrible habit of confusing hunger with hydration. Okay, so if you drink a few minutes before you eat, right, and your body's more thirsty than it is hungry, that hunger will slightly dissipate. So it won't exist anymore. So it's just easier and just far healthier to drink before you eat, because then you won't overeat, you won't overindulge, and you also will feel satiated far quicker than you would if you didn't. Fantastic question. Thank you so much, Vijay. I hope that helps. Okay, she also says here that some foods make us sluggish after a meal. How can we identify what's making us sluggish? Okay, so Vijaya, remember how I've explained previously? I'll go into it again quickly for those that haven't seen my previous live. So there's a difference between feeling full and feeling satiated, okay? Feeling full is when we've eaten a lot and we feel like we have a food baby and we filled our tummy. Satiated is when we eat and we feel satisfied, okay? We're no longer hungry, we don't crave anything, but we feel comfortable, okay? So if you are feeling sluggish after a meal, it means that you've overindulged on a certain food group. So you've probably eaten too many grains, too much protein, or too many fruits and vegetables, okay? So you've also, like I said, you've got to increase and decrease certain foods that you add or take away from your diet. That's the easiest way to identify what's making you feel uncomfortable. So for some people, like for me, for example, I prefer to stay away from pasta. I know that it's a fantastic grain and I absolutely love it, but I've noticed that if I eat a lot of it, then I start to feel really, really sluggish and uncomfortable. So I try to add more vegetables to my plate than I do the pasta. So you've just got to slowly add and decrease those things to figure out what's making you feel that way. But if you are, it's most likely that you've overindulged in a certain group or you've eaten too much of something that was just a craving that your body only needed a little bit of. Okay, so I've covered grains, I've covered protein. Let's head on to fruits and vegetables. So some fruits, as yummy as they are and nutritious as they are, can be harmful if we overindulge in them. So a good example of this is pineapple. Pineapple is very high in fiber and it does contain some zinc, which our body really, really needs, but it tends to be very, very high in sugar. So it increases those insulin levels and just makes us feel very, very hyped up. So I'm going to give you some examples of fruits and vegetables that you should just eat more of, okay? Good examples of these fruits are apples. It's very, very true what they say, an apple a day will keep the doctor away. Apples are a fantastic fruit to eat. Bananas. Bananas contain potassium, which is absolutely fantastic for the body, especially for the health of our blood. Okay. Then berries. Berries have antioxidants in them. They are probably one of the best fruits to eat if you are looking at losing weight because of those antioxidants in them. And they're also really, really sweet and yummy. So if you ever have a sugar craving, I'd rather you pick up a cup of blueberries than a cup of pineapple. Okay, so apples, bananas, any type of berries. And then lastly, a really, really good fruit to pick up is any type of citrus. So oranges, grapefruits or blood oranges, nectarines or clementines or naartjies. I'm trying to pick up on all the names that I can think of in the different countries, but citrus is also a really, really good example of that as well. Then healthy vegetables that you can add. Like I said earlier, green vegetables are your best bet. Just because they're healthier and they provide so much more nutrients than any other vegetables. Another example would be bell peppers. So the reason why I suggest bell peppers is because they're not only really, really colorful, but they're sweet and yummy, and the texture of them is just absolutely fantastic. And they're a great addition to any meal that you're eating. Okay, and then potatoes. So I know a lot of diets and a lot of people say that potatoes are bad because they are a starchy vegetable. But the problem with potatoes aren't the potatoes themselves. It's what we add to the potatoes. If we're adding butter or mayonnaise or more salt to those potatoes, then it causes a problem. But potatoes on their own are very, very good for us, especially the skin. It contains so much nutrients in it. But if you want to have a healthier choice when it comes to potatoes, then I would rather switch to sweet potatoes. They're slightly lower in calories and carbohydrates as well. So I would rather pick those, or I would replace potatoes with carrots. If you really, really want to avoid them, or if they cause that sluggish feeling that Vijay was talking about earlier, then I would rather switch to carrots because they're also a starchy vegetable and they also contain the same amount of nutrients in them. Okay, so Vijay was saying here, the food plate composition, food plate composition, is there any order to eat it? No. There's no particular order that you eat it in, as long as you are covering all the food groups and that you are having those serving sizes, then it's perfect fine. It doesn't matter what you eat first. Okay, but as long as for every meal that you are having, you cover all of your food groups, then it's perfectly fine. They say you don't eat pineapples, pineapples eat you. In a way that is so true. Like pineapple is really, it's I don't know, maybe your joke's going over my head, but pineapples are really, really good. They really are, but it's like I always say to you guys, never cut anything out of your diet. You know, when we're eating a healthier lifestyle, we really need to be realistic about it. Because like I'm saying now, I'm telling you guys about the plate module that half of your plate should be this, and this is a serving size of this. But nobody walks around with serving cups in their handbag. You know, we need to be realistic. If you're going to out to dinner and you really, really want to have, I'm just going to push Paul's buttons here, and you really want to have pizza with pineapple on it, it's perfectly fine as long as you eat in moderation. Don't overdo it. You know, eat something, enjoy it, and then it's perfectly fine. Like I always say, there's no good or bad food. Hi, Andini. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm happy to catch this live, but I'll have to rewatch the replay. It's perfectly fine. Rewatch the replay. Let me know if you have any questions. You can leave them in the comment section below or send me a message in our online hub and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. Okay. This is one of those myths, Paul. When I have my next live and I talk about the myths, this is one of them that I'm going to talk about. Okay, we'll see. We'll have that discussion. We'll have that debate. Okay. So she said, I missed the food plate. Is it half fruits and vegetables and a quarter protein and a quarter grains? That's exactly it, Shannon. So 1/4 whole grains, 1/4 proteins, and then the majority of a plate, so half of your plate can be fruits or vegetables. Okay. Right, so let's go through a few more tips and tricks for you guys. So like I said earlier, let's go back to those fats. So not only are fats energy dense, so like I said, they keep you fuller for longer, but they also provide an important nutrient for the body. Okay, like I said, it's very important that we focus on unsaturated fats. So a good example focus on unsaturated fats. Don't eat saturated fats. Sorry about that. So good examples of saturated fats are cold pressed or hydrogenated trans fats. So a good example of this would be like brick margarine or canola oil. Animal fats, I know sometimes some companies compress those fats and they use them as an additive to certain foods. So avoid those. And then for you guys that are curious, a serving size of oil is usually about a teaspoon, which is 1 serving, and you can have 1 serving of fat per meal. So if you're having a salad, then you can add like 1 teaspoon of olive oil to your salad dressing. It's a healthy addition to it. It'll keep you fuller for longer. And then Another thing that I want to bring up to you guys is a lot of people think that low-fat products are bad. And usually they are in some cases, but it depends on the product itself. So if they are replacing the fat with sugar, right, then it's bad. So it's very, very difficult to taste whether or not they've replaced the fat with sugar. But a tip that I can give you guys, if you want to switch over to low-fat products, right? So, for example, if you want to have low-fat plain yogurt as your protein for breakfast, then you can look on the packaging. If the first 3 ingredients of that low-fat product are sugars, then that means that you shouldn't consume it. Because I'd rather you have fats than sugars. Fats are far more healthier. So if the first 3 ingredients in a low-fat product are sugars, then that's something that you should avoid. Okay? Right. The other thing as well is that I'm sure you guys have seen I'm sure you guys have seen on certain products that they have what's known as a serving suggestion. Okay. I'm so sorry. I've got this terrible frog in the back of my throat. So a serving suggestion, it's basically just rubbish. This is the nicest way that I can put it. It's absolute rubbish. Some of these products, like chocolate, for example, they'll tell you that 2 bars is the serving size. I would not read those serving suggestions. Rather, look at the back of the packaging, okay, and look at the amount of energy that it's going to give you and the ingredients, and focus more on that than the serving suggestion, because a lot of time it can cause what's known as portion distortion. Okay, so what happens is that you can become obsessed with it. So every time you pick up that product, you maybe focus on that serving suggestion, and you might actually cause more harm than you do good. So for those of you who haven't watched this entire live, in the beginning of this live, I was explaining in detail what a binge cycle is. Okay, if we focus on serving suggestions and we start to become obsessed with them, we can hit that binge cycle where, because we're craving something, we overindulge instead of just eating in moderation, and that can cause a problem. So stay away from the serving suggestions, right? Just eat in moderation, focus more on the ingredients and the actual things that are added to that product, rather than the serving suggestion that they give you. Okay. Then another thing that I want to give you guys is that meal timing. Okay, so I know a lot of these diets that we come across tell us to have 3 square meals a day with 2 snacks, or that eating more is better because it can speed up your metabolism and increase your weight loss. And that is simply not true. Eating more meals is not going to increase your metabolism. Unfortunately, just like your face, the metabolism you were born with is the metabolism that you're stuck with. You can't speed it up or slow it down. Okay, you've got to create a diet that works for your metabolism. So if eating 3 meals a day with 2 snacks works for you, then that's perfectly fine. But if you can be productive and satiated with just 2 meals a day, that's also fine. So there's no glove that fits everyone. Okay, we need to eat when we are hungry. So if you instead in one day decide that, okay, today I'm having 3 meals and tomorrow you have 5 meals, that's perfectly fine. Like I always say to you guys, listen to your body. If you are hungry, eat. You have to listen to your body. We as society are so, we're not in in sync with our bodies. We don't listen to our bodies. We focus more. We try to change the fact that we're hungry. And ultimately, we can starve ourselves by doing that. So don't do that. Reconnect with your body. Listen to it. If you're hungry, then just eat. Okay? Don't put a schedule or a routine or a time on how long you eat and when you eat. If you usually eat breakfast at 8 o'clock and all of a sudden today you're just not hungry and you don't want to have breakfast, that's perfectly fine. There's nothing unhealthy about it. Okay. Yes, to eat in moderation. So true. I don't do low-fat stuff. Why is that, Andini? Can you give me a reason as to why you don't do low-fat stuff? I'd love to hear about it. And I don't read the labels either. You know what? It's probably not a bad thing. You'd probably be shocked by some of the things that they add in our foods nowadays. So entirely your prerogative. Whatever works for you, your preference. Okay. So I just want to go back to the plate module and just let you guys know. So once again, 1/4 of whole grains. So typically we want to have 3 to 4 servings of that. Our protein, which is exactly the same, 1/4, 3 to 4 servings of that. And then the majority of our plate should be fruits and vegetables. Again, whatever diet you decide to choose, it's entirely up to you. Remember, healthy living is not a diet, it's a lifestyle. Whatever you decide to change or choose, make sure that it's realistic and it's something that you can maintain for the rest of your life. Because like I said earlier, these 7-day meal plans or 28 meal plans, they work really, really well, but we need to be realistic. We want to live life to the fullest and not obsess about what we're eating and when we are eating it. We should enjoy food. We really, really should. Food should not be a chore. And other than that, you guys, if you have any questions based on the plate module or any nutrition in any nutritional questions, I'd be happy to answer you. You can message me in our hub or on Facebook and I'll help you with that. And yeah, I look forward to seeing you guys in my next live where I'll be crushing some nutritional myths and facts for you guys. And I look forward to seeing you guys again. Thank you so much for joining me today. Let me just go through the last few comments before I go. And Dini says here, the reason, because I never knew there was such a thing as low fat. For me, food is food. Either I eat it or not. And growing up, I ate mostly whole food, homemade, which was never low fat. That's perfectly fine, Andini. You know what? That's what works for you. And you know what? Whole fat products, there's nothing wrong with them. Like we said earlier, as long as we eat in moderation, that's perfectly fine. Thank you so much for these insights, Vijaya, and thank you so much for asking your questions and sharing your point of view. And thank you so much for joining me today as well. Thank you. You're welcome. I look forward to the enzyme debate that we're going to have in my next live. So you better be there. I'll see you there. And Dini, you're so welcome. Shannon, you're welcome as well. Thank you so much, guys, for joining me again. And it's been an absolute blast. And have a fantastic week. And I'll see you next time.